Good evening and God bless you. I'm Sam Medina and this is the Restoration Group. Tonight we're going to be discussing some things that the Lord revealed to me in prayer some time ago. And recently when I was praying with my wife one night, and I began to intercede for the church in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And the Lord began to show me some visions that I found very disturbing. In the first one, it was as if I was standing on the porch of a very large house. The house was white. It was an older house and had this gigantic wraparound porch. And I walked around on the porch getting ready to go inside. The door was open. And on the rail, there were some jackets and coats and sweaters and other garments that had just been laid on the rail of the porch. And I looked at it and I wondered, why would someone just leave their jacket and their coat lying there? And there were quite a few of them. And as I looked at them, I walked up to them and I picked them up and took them away. And I began to pray about this. And I wanted to know, God, what are you telling me? What are you showing me? And the Lord began to show me that these things were apostolic and prophetic mantles that had been abandoned. Some because of the persistent self-will of people called to leadership who would not answer the call, or who would not walk in the call the way God wanted them to walk in it. And there were some who had abandoned their mantle simply because of wrongdoing, because they had walked for so long in their call, but not a call according to purpose. And sometime later, as I continued to pray, I saw another vision in which there was this very dark chamber, kind of dusky. And in this chamber, there were two thrones. And as I continued to pray, the image became more clear. And on those thrones, there were two very sinister-looking creatures. The first, his hands and his facial features were very frog-like. And he wore a very elaborate crown that covered his head and surrounded his face. The second one was even more frog-like in appearance. And I kept praying, and I wanted to know, God, what are you showing me? What is this? And I understood that they were what the Word of God refers to as rulers of the darkness of this age. And that these particular rulers had influence over the prophetic in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And that bothered me. And so I kept praying. And I asked God where the third one was. Because I had this feeling that it wasn't just the two of them, that there was one more that was working with them. I said, God, where's the third one? And then I heard Colorado Springs. And so sometime later, as my wife and I continued to pray into the night, I saw yet another vision, in which I stood outside a very dark chamber. And there was an archway, a very broad one, and it led into a darker place. And there was a figure that approached from the darkness and was coming out into the archway. It was the third of what I call the frog-like princes. And he was very frog-like in his appearance, but he also had the appearance of a withered corpse. It's very dry, very withered. And he stepped out of the shadows, looking very annoyed, as if roused from a slumber. And I prayed more concerning this. And I wondered at how these spirits could have so much influence over the prophetic in those regions. And I kept on praying. And after some time, I don't know how much time went by, but I heard one word, and that word was Iblis. And the word Iblis meant nothing to me. I was like, what is Iblis? I had no idea. And I heard nothing further from the Lord on that matter at that time. So the next day or the day after, I don't remember which, but a day or two later, I said to my wife, I said, does the word Iblis mean anything to you? And so my wife said to me that Iblis was a character in a book she had read. And so I asked her to tell me more about this person. And she told me that Iblis had been a man who had worked and had fought against the enemies of mankind in this particular book. But because of his lust for power and control, he began to use the methods of the enemy and even to play on both sides in order to further his own agenda. It became a game to him. And eventually, someone did kill him. But because Iblis had established such a good reputation for himself, his killer was forever looked at as a villain, and their family was known as very villainous, very treacherous people. Eventually they became that. But his killer was known as a villain because everyone thought that Iblis was this great guy, when in fact he was this wicked traitor.